In a small house by the window sat a woman who had not walked in 3 years. Her right side was frozen, her legs refused to obey, yet every morning she placed a mirror before her chair and watched herself move in her mind. The doctors said it was impossible, that the brain could not rewrite itself, but she whispered to her reflection, "If I can see it, maybe my body will remember." And one morning, after 1,000 days of imagining, she stood. "Now let's find out what really happened."
I suppose I should start with the tea. That's what I was making when everything stopped. It was an ordinary morning. The kind where you don't think about your hands or your legs. Or the way your body just knows how to move. You just move. You reach for the kettle. You pour. You breathe. And then you don't. My name is Margaret. I was 62 when it happened. I remember the cup slipping from my hand. Not dropping. Slipping. Like my fingers had forgotten what holding meant. The sound of it hitting the floor was so loud. Porcelain shattering on tile. But what I remember more than the sound was the silence that came after. My right arm hung at my side. Dead weight. I tried to lift it, but nothing happened. I looked down at my hand and told it to move. It didn't. It just stayed there, limp, useless. I tried to walk toward the phone. My right leg buckled. I fell. Not hard, just slow, like my body was melting into the floor. I lay there for a while. I don't know how long. Time felt strange, thick. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I could see the light coming through the window. But I couldn't move. My husband found me. He came home early. He said my name. Then he said it again louder. He called for help. I heard him, but I couldn't answer. My mouth wouldn't work right. The words were in my head, but they wouldn't come out. The ambulance came. I remember the ceiling of it. White and bright. Someone was talking to me, asking me questions. I tried to answer, but my tongue felt thick. Everything felt thick. At the hospital they did tests. Scans, lights, machines. A doctor came in and sat beside my bed. He had kind eyes, but his mouth was serious. "You've had a stroke, Mrs. Margaret. A significant one. The right side of your brain has been damaged. That's why your left side. Why you can't move it." I stared at him. I understood the words, but they didn't feel real. "Will I walk again?" He paused. That pause told me everything. "We'll do everything we can. Physical therapy, rehabilitation, but I want you to be prepared. The damage is extensive. Most patients with this level of injury, they don't regain full mobility." I asked him what that meant. Full mobility. He looked at my husband, then back at me. "It means you may not walk again." The room went quiet. My husband took my hand, the one that still worked. He squeezed it. I could feel his fear. I spent weeks in that hospital. They moved me to a rehabilitation center after. Everyday therapists came and worked with me. They stretched my arm. They tried to get my leg to respond. They were patient. They were kind. But I could see it in their faces. They didn't think I would walk. I tried. I really tried. But my body wouldn't listen. My leg felt like it belonged to someone else. When I told it to move, it just sat there. Heavy. Numb. After 3 months they sent me home. They gave me a wheelchair. They taught my husband how to help me transfer from the bed to the chair. They gave me exercises to do. But they didn't say I would walk again. They said I should focus on adapting. On learning to live with my new limitations. Limitations. That word sat in my chest like a stone. My house felt different when I came back. Smaller. The hallways were too narrow for the wheelchair. We had to rearrange furniture. My husband built a ramp at the front door. He moved our bedroom downstairs. I sat in that chair and looked out the window. I watched people walk by. Mothers pushing strollers, kids running, old men with canes. They moved without thinking about it. They just walked. I wanted to walk. Every night I lay in bed and tried to move my leg. I stared at it. I told it to lift. I imagined the muscle contracting. I imagined the knee bending. But nothing happened, just stillness. My husband tried to stay positive. He smiled. He said it would get better. But I could see the sadness in his eyes. He missed the person I used to be. The one who moved. The one who didn't need help. My daughter came to visit. She lived far away, but she came as often as she could. She sat beside me and held my hand. She told me about her life, her kids, her job, but I could see the way she looked at me. Like I was fragile, like I might break. I didn't want to be fragile. I didn't want to be someone people felt sorry for. One afternoon I was sitting by the window. The sun was low. The light was golden. I watched a bird land on the fence outside. It hopped from post to post. So light, so free. I thought about my legs. About how they used to carry me. How I used to walk to the store. How I used to dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. How I used to climb stairs without thinking. And I realized something. My legs hadn't forgotten how to walk. My brain had. I had read about it once. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. To create new pathways when old ones are damaged. I didn't know much about it. Just that it was possible. That the brain could learn again. I thought about that for a long time. If my brain could learn again, maybe it could remember. Maybe it could teach my legs to move. I asked my husband to bring me a mirror. A big one. He looked confused, but he did it. He set it up in front of my wheelchair. I looked at myself, at my reflection, at my legs. Then I closed my eyes. And I imagined walking, not just thinking about it. Really imagining it. I pictured my right leg lifting. I pictured my foot pressing into the ground. I pictured my weight shifting. I pictured the rhythm of it. Left, right, left, right. I did this every day. Every morning I sat in front of that mirror. I closed my eyes, and I walked in my mind. My husband thought I was losing it. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was teaching my brain to remember. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, but I could see the worry in his face. The therapist came once a week. She worked with me, stretching, strengthening, but she didn't think I would walk either. She said I was making progress. Small progress, but she never said the word walk. I didn't care. I kept imagining. I found old videos of myself. From before. Birthdays, holidays, ordinary days. I watched myself move. I watched the way I walked. The way my hips swayed. The way my arms swung. The way my feet landed. Then I closed my eyes and I walked again. In my mind, days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed outside my window. Leaves fell. Snow came. Then melted. Then flowers bloomed. And I kept imagining. People stopped asking if I was getting better. They stopped talking about recovery. They started talking about acceptance. About moving forward. About living with what is. But I wasn't ready to accept. Not yet. Every morning I woke up. I transferred into my wheelchair. I rolled to the window. I set up the mirror. I closed my eyes. And I walked. My husband stopped watching. He went about his day. He cooked. He cleaned. He worked. He lived his life around me. Around my stillness. But I wasn't still. Not in my mind. In my mind I was walking. Every single day. I read everything I could about the brain. About neurons. About pathways. About how the brain communicates with the body. I learned about mirror neurons. The ones that fire when you watch someone else move. The ones that make you feel like you're moving too. I wondered if imagining was enough. If my brain could fire those same neurons just by thinking. Just by seeing it in my mind. I didn't know, but I kept trying. 3 years passed. 3 years of sitting. 3 years of imagining. 3 years of hoping. My daughter stopped visiting as much. My husband grew quieter. The therapist stopped coming. Everyone had moved on, but I hadn't. One morning I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still dark. My husband was asleep beside me. I lay there for a while, listening to him breathe, listening to the quiet. Then I sat up. I transferred into my wheelchair. I rolled to the window. The sky was just starting to lighten. Pink and soft. I set up the mirror. I closed my eyes. I imagined walking, but this time something felt different. I don't know how to explain it. It was like a whisper. Like a tiny spark. Like something deep inside me was waking up. I opened my eyes. I looked at my legs. I told my right leg to move. And it did. Not much. Just a twitch. Just a tiny movement. But it moved. I stared at it. I held my breath. I told it to move again. It moved again. I started crying. Not loud. Just quiet tears running down my face. My leg had moved. After 3 years, it had moved. I didn't tell anyone at first. I was afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud it would stop. Afraid that it was a fluke. Afraid that I had imagined it. But the next morning I tried again. I sat in front of the mirror. I closed my eyes. I imagined my leg lifting. Then I opened my eyes and told it to move. It moved. A little more this time. The muscle contracted. The knee bent slightly. It was small but it was real. I did it again, and again. Each time it moved a little more. Each time the connection felt a little stronger. After a week I told my husband. He was making breakfast. I called him over. He came and stood behind my chair. Watch, I said. I focused. I imagined. I told my leg to move. It lifted, just an inch off the footrest. But it lifted. He gasped. His hand went to his mouth. He stared at my leg. Then at me. Then back at my leg. How? I've been practicing, I said. In my mind. He didn't understand. I tried to explain. About the imagining. About the mirror neurons. About the brain relearning. He listened, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Can you do it again? I did it again. And again. Each time he watched like he was seeing a miracle. Maybe he was. We called the therapist. She came the next day. She looked skeptical when my husband told her. But when I showed her, she went silent. She watched my leg move. Then she checked my reflexes. She tested my strength. She asked me questions. This shouldn't be possible, she said. The damage was too extensive. There's no medical reason for this level of recovery. I told her what I had been doing. The imagining, the visualization, the daily practice in my mind. She looked at me for a long time. I've heard of this, she said slowly. There's research, limited research, about mental imagery and motor recovery. About how the brain can create new pathways through visualization. But I've never seen it work like this. She started coming twice a week. She brought new exercises. She worked with me. She pushed me harder than before. And my leg kept getting stronger. The movement was small at first. Just lifting, just bending. But over the next few weeks it grew. I could flex my foot. I could straighten my knee. I could press down with some force. My husband cried one night. We were sitting at dinner. He just looked at me and started crying. He said he thought he had lost me. He said he didn't think I would ever move again. I reached across the table and took his hand. The one that had always worked. I squeezed it. I'm still here, I said. He nodded. He wiped his eyes. He smiled. The next goal was standing. That terrified me. I hadn't stood in 3 years. My bones felt weak. My muscles felt small. But the therapist said it was time to try. She brought a walker. She positioned it in front of me. She stood beside me with her hands ready to catch me. Whenever you're ready, she said. I sat there for a moment. I closed my eyes. I imagined standing. I imagined my legs bearing weight. I imagined my body rising. Then I opened my eyes. I gripped the walker. I took a breath. I pushed. My left leg responded immediately. It was strong. It had always been strong. But my right leg trembled. It shook. It didn't want to hold me. I pushed harder. I imagined the muscle firing. I imagined the strength. And slowly, impossibly, I rose. I was standing. My legs were shaking. My arms were gripping the walker so hard my knuckles were white. But I was standing. The therapist was saying something, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. All I could feel was my feet on the ground. I stood for 10 seconds. Then 20. Then 30. My right leg started to give out. The therapist helped me sit back down. I was breathing hard. My whole body was trembling. But I was smiling. I couldn't stop smiling. You did it, my husband said. His voice was shaking. I did it, I whispered. We practiced standing every day after that. At first I could only hold it for a minute. Then 2 minutes. Then 5. My leg grew stronger. My balance improved. My body started to remember. Then came the hardest part. Walking. The therapist explained that standing and walking are completely different. Standing is static. Walking is dynamic. It requires balance and coordination and rhythm. It requires both legs working together. But I had been imagining it for 3 years. I had walked thousands of miles in my mind. I knew the rhythm. I knew the movement. We started with 1 step. Just 1. From the walker to the chair. I stood. I gripped the walker. I imagined my right leg lifting. I imagined it moving forward. I imagined it landing. Then I told it to move. It lifted. Slowly, shakily. It moved forward. It landed. 1 step. I looked at the therapist. She was staring at me with wide eyes. Do it again, she said. I did it again. And again. Each step was slow. Each step was shaky. But each step was real. After a week I could take 3 steps. After 2 weeks I could take 10. After a month I could walk across the room. My husband watched me every day. He walked beside me. He kept his hands out ready to catch me if I fell. But I didn't fall. I wobbled. I trembled. But I didn't fall. My daughter came to visit. She hadn't been back in months. She walked in the door and I was standing in the hallway with the walker, waiting for her. She dropped her bags. She stared at me. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. "Hi honey," I said. She ran to me. She hugged me so hard I almost lost my balance. She was crying, sobbing into my shoulder. I thought you'd never." "I know," I said. "Me too." We stood there for a long time. Her holding me holding her, both of us crying. That night we had dinner together. All of us, my husband, my daughter, her kids. We sat around the table and talked and laughed. And I didn't feel fragile anymore. I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. The therapist wanted to study me. She asked if she could document my case. She said it could help other people. Other stroke survivors. I agreed. She brought in doctors, neurologists, researchers. They ran tests. They did brain scans. They asked me 1,000 questions. The scans showed something remarkable. My brain had created new pathways. Completely new ones. The damaged areas were still damaged. But the healthy areas had taken over. They had learned to communicate with my legs in a new way. One doctor said it was the most significant case of neuroplasticity he had ever seen. He said my visualization practice had essentially taught my brain to rewire itself. "You imagined it into existence," he said. I thought about that. Imagined it into existence. It sounded impossible, but I had lived it. I had felt it. I knew it was real. They published papers. They gave presentations. My case became part of medical journals, part of textbooks, part of research studies, but I didn't care about any of that. I just cared that I could walk. I started walking outside, just to the end of the driveway at first, then to the mailbox, then around the block. My husband walked with me. We went slow. We didn't talk much. We just walked. The neighbors would see me. Some of them remembered. They remembered me in the wheelchair. They would stop and stare. Some would wave. Some would come over and tell me how happy they were, how proud they were. I smiled and thanked them. But inside I felt something else. I felt grateful, not proud, not accomplished, just grateful. Grateful that my brain had listened. Grateful that my body had remembered. Grateful that I had kept trying. Months passed. My walking improved. I didn't need the walker anymore. Just a cane. And eventually not even that. I walked slowly. I had a limp. My right leg was still weaker than my left. But I walked. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I went to the grocery store. I walked through the aisles. I picked things off the shelves. I stood in line. I felt normal. I went to the park. I walked along the path. I sat on a bench and watched people. Kids playing, dogs running, couples walking hand in hand. I used to watch from my window. Now I was here, among them. I went to visit my daughter. I drove there myself. My husband was nervous. He wanted to come with me. But I told him I needed to do it alone. I needed to know I could. The drive was long. My leg got tired. But I made it. I pulled into her driveway. I got out of the car. I walked to her door. I knocked. She opened it. She saw me standing there. No walker. No wheelchair. Just me. She started crying again. Happy tears. She hugged me. She said she couldn't believe it. She kept saying it over and over. I can't believe it. I stayed with her for a few days. We walked together. We talked. We laughed. She told me she had been so scared. She thought she was going to lose me. She thought I would never be the same. I told her I wasn't the same. I was different now, but different wasn't bad. Different was just different. When I got home I sat by the window. The same window I had sat at for 3 years. The same window where I had imagined walking. Where I had imagined moving. Where I had refused to give up. I looked at the mirror. The one my husband had set up for me. The one I had stared into every day. I thought about all those mornings. All that time. All that hope. I thought about how close I had come to giving up. How many times I had wondered if it was pointless. If I was wasting my time. If I was just fooling myself. But I hadn't stopped. I had kept going. Even when no one believed me. Even when I barely believed myself. And it had worked. One day I got a call from the therapist. She asked if I would be willing to speak to other stroke survivors. To share my story. To give them hope. I wasn't sure. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't inspirational. I was just someone who had gotten lucky. Someone whose brain had cooperated. Someone who had tried something that shouldn't have worked but did. But I said yes, because maybe it could help someone. Maybe someone else needed to hear that it was possible. The meeting was at a rehabilitation center. There were about 20 people there. Some in wheelchairs, some with walkers, some with canes, all of them looking tired, all of them looking defeated. I stood at the front of the room. I told them my story. I told them about the stroke, about the paralysis, about the doctors saying I wouldn't walk, about the 3 years of imagining. I told them about the mirror, about the visualization, about the daily practice, about the tiny movements that grew into steps. They listened. Some of them looked skeptical. Some looked hopeful. Some just looked sad. When I finished, one woman raised her hand. She was younger than me. Maybe 50. She was in a wheelchair. "Did you really think it would work?" she asked. I thought about that. Did I think it would work? No, I said honestly. I didn't think it would work. I just didn't know what else to do. So I tried. She nodded slowly. Another man asked how long it took. How long before I saw results? 3 years, I said. 3 years before my leg moved. Then another year before I could walk. He looked down. 4 years. That was a long time. Maybe too long. But I had nothing else to do, I added. I was sitting in that chair anyway. So I might as well have been imagining. A few people smiled at that. I told them I wasn't saying it would work for everyone. I wasn't saying visualization was a cure. I was just saying it worked for me. And maybe it was worth trying. After the talk, several people came up to me. They thanked me. They said I had given them hope. One woman asked if I could teach her how to visualize, how to imagine movement. I told her it was simple. Close your eyes. Picture yourself moving. Picture every detail. The muscles, the joints, the weight shifting, the rhythm. Do it every day. Even if nothing happens, just keep doing it. She nodded. She said she would try. I left that meeting feeling strange. I had shared something deeply personal. Something I had kept mostly to myself. And people had listened. People had cared. Maybe my story did matter. Maybe it could help someone. I started speaking more often. At hospitals, at support groups, at rehabilitation centers. I told my story over and over. Each time I saw the same looks. Skepticism, hope, sadness, but also something else. Curiosity. People wanted to know if it was real. If the brain could really do that. If imagination could really create change. I told them what the doctors had told me. That the brain is more powerful than we understand. That it can adapt. That it can rewire. That it can heal. Not always. Not for everyone. But sometimes. And sometimes is enough to try. I met other survivors who had tried visualization. Some said it helped. Some said it didn't. But all of them said it gave them something to do. Something to hope for. Something to focus on besides the loss. And maybe that was enough. Maybe hope was the real medicine. My life settled into a new rhythm. I walked every day. I helped other survivors. I spent time with my family. I lived. But I never forgot those 3 years. Those 3 years of stillness. Those 3 years of imagining. Those 3 years of refusing to accept what everyone told me was true. Because they were wrong. It wasn't impossible. It was just improbable. And improbable isn't the same as impossible. One evening my husband and I were sitting on the porch. The sun was setting. The air was cool. We weren't talking. Just sitting. Just being. He reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. I looked at him. He was staring straight ahead. Not at me. Just at the sky. For what? For not giving up. For fighting. For believing when no one else did. I squeezed his hand. "I didn't know if I believed," I said. "I just didn't know what else to do." He smiled. "That's the same thing." Maybe it was. Maybe believing wasn't about certainty. Maybe it was just about trying anyway. We sat there until the sun disappeared. Until the stars came out. Until the air turned cold. Then we went inside. Together. Both of us walking. I thought about all the things I had lost. The 3 years. The independence. The person I used to be. I thought about how much had changed. How much I had changed. But I also thought about what I had gained. Patience, gratitude, understanding, a deeper appreciation for movement. For the body, for the mind. I wouldn't wish a stroke on anyone. I wouldn't wish paralysis on anyone. But I also wouldn't trade what I learned, what I discovered, what I became. Sometimes the worst things teach us the most important lessons. I started writing about my experience. Not for publication, just for myself. I wrote about the fear, the despair, the determination, the hope. I wrote about the long mornings staring into the mirror. About the frustration, about the tiny victories. I wrote about the moment my leg first moved. About how it felt like the world had shifted. About how something impossible had suddenly become possible. I wrote about walking again. About the first step. About the feeling of my feet on the ground. About the tears. About the gratitude. Writing helped me process it. Helped me understand it. Helped me see how far I had come. One day my daughter asked if she could read what I had written. I hesitated. It was personal, raw, but I let her. She read it in one sitting. When she finished, she was crying. "Mom," she said, "other people need to read this." I shook my head. "It's just for me." "No," she said, "it's for everyone who's ever been told they can't. Everyone who's ever felt hopeless. Everyone who needs to know that sometimes the impossible happens." I thought about that. About the people I had spoken to. About the woman who asked me to teach her to visualize. About the man who looked defeated when I said it took 4 years. Maybe she was right. Maybe my words could reach people my voice couldn't. So I worked on it. I turned my journal into something more. Something readable. Something that told the whole story. The good parts and the bad parts. The victories and the failures. It took months. But when it was done, I had a book. A small book. A simple book. But it was mine. My daughter helped me find a publisher. A small one. They specialized in medical memoirs. In stories of recovery and resilience. They said yes. The book came out quietly. No big launch. No publicity. Just a quiet release into the world. But people found it. Stroke survivors. Families. Therapists. Doctors. They read it. They reached out. They thanked me. One woman wrote that she had given up on walking. But after reading my book she tried visualization. And after 6 months her leg moved. She wasn't walking yet, but she was trying, and that was enough. A man wrote that his wife had a stroke. She was depressed. She had given up hope. He read her my book. She cried. Then she asked for a mirror. She started imagining. He said it gave her something to focus on. Something to hope for. Those letters meant more to me than anything. More than the medical papers. More than the presentations. More than the recognition. Because they meant my story mattered. My struggle mattered. My refusal to give up mattered. I kept speaking. Kept writing. Kept sharing. Not because I thought I had all the answers. But because I knew what it felt like to have none. To feel lost. To feel hopeless. To feel like your body had betrayed you. And I knew what it felt like to find a way back. Even when everyone said there was no way. One day I was walking in the park. It was autumn. The leaves were falling. The air smelled like earth and cold. I was walking slowly, my cane tapping against the path. A woman approached me. She was older than me. She was using a walker. She stopped in front of me. "Are you Margaret?" she asked. I nodded. "I read your book," she said. "I had a stroke 2 years ago. I can't walk. But I've been visualizing. Every day. Just like you said. Has it helped?" I asked. She smiled. "I don't know yet. But it gives me something to do. Something to hope for." She paused. "Thank you." I watched her walk away. Slowly. Carefully. Her walker supporting her. But she was moving. She was trying. And that was beautiful. I realized then that my story wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who refuses to give up. Everyone who keeps trying even when the odds are against them. Everyone who believes in the possibility of change. Because change is possible. Not always. Not for everyone. But possible. And possibility is a powerful thing. Years continued to pass. My walking became easier. My leg grew stronger. The limp faded. I still moved slower than I used to. I still got tired more easily. But I moved. I traveled. My husband and I went places we had always talked about but never gone. We walked through museums. We hiked gentle trails. We explored new cities. Every step felt like a gift. Every moment of movement felt like a miracle. I continued working with stroke survivors. I ran visualization workshops. I taught people how to imagine movement, how to picture their bodies whole, how to train their brains through thought. Not everyone saw results. Some people tried for months and nothing happened. They would email me. They would say it wasn't working. They would ask what they were doing wrong. I told them they weren't doing anything wrong. I told them that my case was unusual, that the brain is complex, that recovery looks different for everyone. But I also told them to keep trying. Because even if their leg never moved, even if they never walked, the act of trying mattered. The act of hoping mattered. The act of refusing to surrender mattered. Because surrender is easy, hope is hard. I met a young man once. He was in his 30s. He had a stroke after a car accident. He was paralyzed on his right side. He was angry. He said life wasn't fair. He said he was too young for this. He said he had given up. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him to be positive. I just listened. Then I told him about my 3 years. About sitting in that chair. About staring into that mirror. About imagining walking when everyone said I never would. Did you ever want to give up? He asked. Every day, I said. He looked surprised. But I didn't have anything else to do, I continued. So I kept going. Not because I was brave. Not because I was strong. But because I didn't know what else to do with my time. He sat with that for a moment. You really think it could work for me? I don't know, I said honestly. But I think it's worth trying. What do you have to lose? He started visualizing. He emailed me updates. At first nothing happened, but he kept going, and after 8 months his hand moved. Just a twitch, but it moved. He called me crying. He said he couldn't believe it. He said he thought I was crazy. He said he almost gave up 100 times. But he didn't, and now his hand was moving. That's the thing about hope. It's stubborn. It refuses to die even when everything says it should. I also worked with doctors. I spoke at medical conferences. I explained my process. I showed them the brain scans. I talked about neuroplasticity and visualization and the power of the mind. Some doctors were skeptical. They said my case was an anomaly. They said it couldn't be replicated. They said I got lucky. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did get lucky. But I also tried. And trying plus luck is better than luck alone. Other doctors were intrigued. They started incorporating visualization into their rehabilitation programs. They taught their patients to imagine movement, to picture their bodies whole. Some patients improved, some didn't, but the ones who did, the ones who saw even the smallest change, they were grateful. One doctor told me that visualization gave his patients agency. It gave them something they could control. In a situation where they felt helpless, where their bodies had betrayed them, visualization gave them power, and power matters, even if it's just the power of thought. My daughter had a baby. A little girl, my first grandchild. I flew out to meet her. I held her in my arms. She was so small, so fragile, so perfect. My daughter watched me hold her baby, watched me stand, watched me move. I'm so glad you're here, Mom, she said. I'm so glad you fought. I looked at my granddaughter, at her tiny fingers, at her closed eyes, at her peaceful face. Me too, I whispered. I thought about all the moments I could have missed. All the moments that would have passed without me if I had given up. If I had accepted the wheelchair. If I had stopped imagining. This moment, holding my grandchild, standing, moving, living. This was why I fought. Not for the medical papers. Not for the recognition. Not for the speaking engagements. But for this. For life. For presence. For moments that mattered. I stayed with my daughter for a week. I helped her with the baby. I walked to the store for diapers. I cooked meals. I cleaned. I moved through her house like I belonged there. Because I did. I belonged in my own life again. When I flew home, my husband picked me up from the airport. He hugged me. He asked about the baby. He asked about my daughter. He asked if I was tired. I was tired, but I was happy. We drove home together. We talked about becoming grandparents. About how strange it felt. About how wonderful it was. When. Retry. Continue. We got home. I sat by the window. The same window. The same spot where I had spent 3 years imagining. Where I had refused to give up. Where I had taught my brain to remember. I looked out at the street. At the people walking by. At the world moving. And I felt grateful. So deeply grateful. Not just for walking. But for everything. For my husband. For my daughter. For my granddaughter. For my life. For the 3 years that felt like prison but taught me patience. For the pain that taught me strength. For the impossible that became possible. I thought about the woman I was before the stroke. She took things for granted. She moved without thinking. She complained about small things. She worried about things that didn't matter. That woman was gone. The stroke took her, but in her place was someone else. Someone who understood fragility, someone who appreciated movement, someone who knew that every breath was a gift. I liked this version of myself better. My husband came and sat beside me. He didn't say anything. He just took my hand. We sat there together, watching the light fade, watching the day end. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. "Everything," I said. "Nothing. I don't know." He smiled. "That sounds about right." We sat in comfortable silence. The kind of silence that only comes after years together. After surviving something hard together. After learning what really matters. "I love you," I said. "I love you too," he said. And we sat there, two people who had walked through fire. Who had come out the other side. Who had learned that sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. Time kept moving, as it always does. I kept walking. I kept speaking. I kept helping others. I kept living. But I also started slowing down. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to savor things. To notice things. To be present for things. I walked slower. I looked around more. I listened better. I appreciated deeper. I spent more time with my granddaughter. She started walking. I watched her take her first steps. Wobbling, uncertain, brave. I thought about my own first steps after the stroke. How similar they were. How we're all just learning. All just trying. All just hoping our legs will hold us. She fell, then got up, then tried again. No hesitation, no fear, just pure determination. I wished I had that when I was learning to walk again. That childlike fearlessness. That refusal to see falling as failure. But maybe I did. Maybe that's exactly what I had. I just didn't realize it. My husband and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. We had a small party. Family and friends. People who had been with us through everything. Through the stroke. Through the recovery. Through the impossible. Someone gave a toast. They talked about our love. About our commitment. About how we had stayed together through the hardest times. My husband squeezed my hand under the table. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes, at the gray in his hair, at the man who had stayed, who had helped, who had believed even when he doubted. "Thank you," I whispered. He knew what I meant. "Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for pushing my wheelchair. Thank you for building the ramp. Thank you for setting up the mirror. Thank you for letting me imagine. Thank you for waiting. Always," he whispered back. One day I received a letter from a university. They wanted to study my case further. They wanted to do more brain scans, more tests. They wanted to understand exactly how visualization had created new neural pathways. I agreed, not because I needed to prove anything, but because maybe it could help someone else. Maybe it could advance the science. Maybe it could give other people hope. They ran the tests. They analyzed the results. They published their findings. The conclusion was remarkable. My brain had essentially created a completely new motor pathway. The damaged area was still damaged, but healthy areas had taken over. They had learned to control my leg through a different route, and the visualization had accelerated that process, had essentially taught my brain where to build the new roads. One researcher said it was like my mind had drawn a map, and my brain had followed it. I liked that. A map drawn by imagination. A path created by hope. I continued teaching workshops, but I also started teaching something else. Not just visualization, but acceptance. Because the truth is not everyone recovers. Not everyone walks again. Not everyone's brain rewires. And that's okay. That's not failure. That's just reality. I met a woman who had been visualizing for 5 years. Nothing had happened. Her leg never moved. She was devastated. She felt like she had wasted her time. Like she had failed. I told her she hadn't failed. I told her that trying is never wasted. That hope is never pointless. That the act of refusing to surrender has value. Even if the outcome isn't what we wanted. "But you walked," she said. "I didn't." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry it didn't work for you. I'm sorry the brain is unpredictable. I'm sorry life isn't fair." She started crying. Not angry crying, just sad crying. The kind that comes from grief. From loss. From letting go. "But you're still here," I continued. "You're still alive. You're still you. And that matters. That counts." She looked at me through her tears. Does it get easier, accepting it? I don't know, I said honestly. I didn't have to accept it. My brain cooperated, but I imagine it's hard. I imagine it takes time. I imagine it's a different kind of strength. She nodded slowly. It is. We sat together for a while. Two women who had both faced the same thing but had different outcomes. Both valid, both real, both worthy. I realized then that my story wasn't just about walking again. It was about trying. It was about hoping. It was about refusing to accept what everyone says is true until you've tried everything. But it was also about knowing when to let go, when to accept, when to find peace with what is rather than what could be. Both are important. Both are hard. Both require courage. I kept writing. I wrote about acceptance, about grief, about finding meaning in unexpected places, about building a life that looks different than you planned, but is still beautiful, because life is beautiful, even when it's hard, even when it's not what we wanted, even when it's broken, maybe especially then. One evening I was sitting on the porch again. The same porch, the same spot, but everything felt different. The air was warm, summer. The fireflies were out, blinking, dancing, creating light in the darkness. My husband was beside me. My daughter was visiting. My granddaughter was asleep inside. The people I loved were near. The people who mattered were here. And I was walking. I could stand up right now and walk inside. I could climb the stairs. I could move through the world. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was just sitting, just being, just present, because that's what I learned. That movement matters, but stillness matters too. That fighting matters, but resting matters too. That hope matters, but acceptance matters too. Life is all of it. The trying and the surrendering. The moving and the sitting. The hoping and the accepting. All of it together. All of it beautiful. What are you smiling about? My husband asked. I realized I was smiling. I hadn't even noticed. Everything, I said. He smiled too. Good answer. We sat there as the sun set. As the fireflies danced, as the world turned dark and then light again. And I thought about that woman in the wheelchair. The one who stared into a mirror for 3 years. The one who imagined walking when everyone said she never would. The one who refused to give up. She was brave. She was stubborn. She was desperate. But she was also just human. Just someone who wanted to move. Who wanted to live. Who wanted to be here. And she made it. Against all odds. Against all logic. Against all expectations. She made it. I made it. And somewhere in that silence between thought and movement, between imagination and reality, between impossible and possible, I learned something. The body listens when the mind whispers. Not always, not for everyone, but sometimes. And sometimes is enough. I stood up, not because I needed to, but because I could. I walked to the edge of the porch. I looked out at the yard, at the trees, at the sky. My husband watched me. My daughter came to the door. They both watched me stand there, moving, breathing, living. I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway, I said. Want company? My husband asked. No, I said. I want to go alone. He understood. He always understood. I walked slowly, down the steps, across the yard, along the driveway, my feet pressing into the ground, my legs carrying me, my body remembering. I reached the end. I turned around. I looked back at the house, at the people in the windows, at the light spilling out onto the lawn. And I felt it again. That overwhelming gratitude, that deep appreciation, that profound understanding of what matters. This moment, this life, this breath. I walked back, slowly, carefully, not because I had to, but because I wanted to savor it. Every step, every movement, every second. When I reached the porch, my daughter hugged me. She didn't say anything. She just held me, and I held her back. I'm proud of you, Mom, she whispered. I'm proud of me too, I whispered back. We went inside. We sat together. We talked and laughed and lived. And somewhere in the back of my mind, in that quiet place where thoughts become action, where imagination becomes reality, where impossible becomes possible, I whispered thank you. Thank you to my brain for listening. Thank you to my body for remembering. Thank you to the people who refused to give up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself. Thank you for the 3 years of stillness that taught me patience. Thank you for the pain that taught me strength. Thank you for the wheelchair that taught me gratitude. Thank you for the mirror. Thank you for the imagination. Thank you for the tiny movements that became steps. Thank you for letting me walk again. Not because walking made me whole, but because trying made me human. And being human, being here, being present, that's enough. That's everything. The night grew late. My granddaughter woke up. I held her. I rocked her. I walked her around the room until she fell back asleep. My daughter watched me. She was crying quietly. Happy tears. Grateful tears. I remember when you couldn't do that, she said softly. When you couldn't stand, couldn't walk, couldn't hold anything. I remember too, I said. How did you do it, Mom? How did you keep going? I thought about that. How did I keep going? I didn't know how to stop, I said. So I just kept imagining. Kept trying. Kept hoping. That's all? That's all. She smiled. That's everything. She was right. It was everything. I laid my granddaughter back in her crib. I stood there watching her sleep. Watching her chest rise and fall. Watching her tiny hands curl into fists. She would grow up. She would learn to walk. To run. To move through the world without thinking about it. And maybe someday something would happen. Something that would take that movement away. Something that would make her fight to get it back. And if that day came, if she ever faced what I faced, I hoped she would remember this. Remember that her grandmother fought. That her grandmother refused to surrender. That her grandmother walked again. Not because she was special, but because she tried. And trying matters. Trying is everything. I walked back to the living room. My husband was waiting. He held out his hand. I took it. We walked upstairs together. Both of us moving. Both of us whole. We got into bed. He turned off the light. The room went dark. Quiet. I love you, he said. I love you too, I said. And as I drifted off to sleep, as my mind grew quiet, as my body relaxed into stillness, I thought about walking, about imagining, about the 3 years that changed everything. And I smiled. Because I had walked today, I would walk tomorrow. I would keep walking for as long as my body let me. Not because I had to prove anything. Not because I had something to show. But because I could. And that was enough. That was everything. In the darkness. In the quiet. In that space between waking and sleeping. I whispered one last time. Thank you. And somewhere deep inside, in that place where mind meets body, where thought becomes movement, where impossible becomes possible, my brain whispered back, you're welcome. And I learned to walk again.